Thank you for the nice introduction, and thanks to Scott and Kelly on the great introduction to the whole conference. We're going to start off today with a panel with some really great panelists on ethics. I am happy to be back again. I have been re-invited to do the ethics panel this year, and it is a little different this year in that in past years it's focused mostly on energy professionals, but I think our introductory speakers from both the colleges hit it on the head, that panels like this, including an energy professional and ag professionals, are so incredibly valuable because those are the people that we are working with on the ground on a day-to-day basis. In both businesses, you're always going to have crossover. And one of the key words I said is I heard them say is collaboration. And I think the idea of collaboration falls within, an ethical framework for conducting business in the state of Wyoming. We're a unique state, a small state, where a lot of people know everyone. So reputation matters here, and if we want business to be successful in this state, things like collaboration and acting ethically are incredibly important. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce all of our panelists. The first one is Mark Isley. And you guys, as I say your name, if you want to come to the stage. Mark is the owner and operator of King Ranch outside of Cheyenne, Wyoming, a red and black Angus cow-calf operation. The ranch runs cattle on both privately owned and public lands with state and federal grazing leases. And Mr. Isley understands the delicate balance between protecting private property rights and maintaining access to public lands while increasing the numbers of people who want to experience the beauty of the West. King Ranch was also recognized in 2015 for the Leopold Conservation Award and Wyoming Stock Growers Environmental Stewardship Award. Mark is also a past president of the National Beef Cattlemen's Association. Thanks for being here today, Mark. Next is Callie Birch. Callie is a surface landman with Continental Resources and working primarily in the Powder River Basin. She is a graduate of the University of Wyoming and also has a vast ranching background, as she was raised on a ranch in Colony, Wyoming, and thus still maintains extremely strong ties to ranching and agriculture, connections that have helped her been instrumental in building the relationship she has today in the energy industry. And our final speaker is Doug Stark, the interim director of the UW Ranch Management and Agricultural Leadership Program. Doug is a distinguished leader in agricultural finance and a devoted supporter of the University of Wyoming. A Riverton native and UW alum, Mr. Stark served as president and CEO of Farm Credit Services of America from 2005 to 2017. His deep commitment to his alma mater was reflected in his current chair as UW Foundation Board of Director member and a member of the Agricultural Dean's Advisory Board, as well as his instrumental work in launching the Ranch Management and Agricultural Leadership Program, of which he is currently the director. And recognizing of his professional success and contributions to energy evolution and agricultural landscapes of the West, Mr. Stark was honored with the UW Distinguished Alumni Award in 2022. So I appreciate our panelists here today. I'm going to start off with just a brief introduction. One thing I wanted to note is most of the questions that we've considered in putting together this panel were developed by the students. And as we looked through those, we made no changes. They were very, very good questions. So congratulations, students. And I think they really gave us a good framework to consider some of the issues we're talking about. At its base, when we look at ethics, and this is very much not going to be a speech where we just talk about what is ethics. But at its base, ethics is a set of moral values which govern the actions of an individual or group of professionals, or other people say moral principles that govern a person's behavior or the conducting of an activity. One thing when we talk about ethics is that ethics are generally not the law, but they certainly inform the law in professional and legal business conduct in almost all professions. And there's a great quote The law is the floor, not the ceiling. Just because something is legal doesn't mean it's ethical. It is critical to view ethics from a value-based perspective. But why are ethics important in business? Well, I mean, first and foremost, and you've heard us say this in energy forums across the state for years, is business is built upon individuals doing and saying things correctly, and I think that's an especially huge norm here in Wyoming. You know, some professionals are regulated. Attorneys, doctors, real estate agents, brokers, insurance agents, accountants, all have to be licensed and have ethical codes that are part of their licensure, where if they do not comply, their career can be ended and their licenses can be revoked. Other professions have trade groups or other advocacy organizations where memberships have strict adherence to a type of code of ethics. For Landman, that's your AAPL, WAPL standards. For any engineers in the room, you have the Wyoming Board of Registration for Professional Engineers. And if you're members of other organizations, organizations like the Society of Petroleum Evaluation Engineers, the Society of Professional Engineers, and the National Society of Professional Engineers, all have very robust ethical codes. Geologists is the same. Board of Professional Geologists and the American Association of Petroleum Geologists. And surveyors even have an ethical code under Wyoming law. Not all professions do, though, but ethics remains such an important part of any profession and any business. You're going to hear today, just through the conversation, some of those general trends that you hear about ethical conversations all the time. You know, fair and honest dealing, being honest. Adhering to a high standard of conduct and fulfilling your duties to your employers, avoiding conflicts of interest, performing professional services in a competent manner, avoiding any act or conduct which causes disrespect for or a lack of confidence to both your industry and the people you're dealing with. And really the biggest thing is honesty, integrity, loyalty, fairness, impartiality, candor, fidelity to trust. Those are words that we'll hear all the time in the ethical world. By adhering to those ethical principles, it's going to help maintain your personal integrity. It's going to help maintain the public trust. It's certainly going to make your public relationships easier, and that's especially critical in a forum today, like we have today, where we do have multiple use people speaking on various issues in the conference: ag, energy, you know, all of these. The relationships are what is important in achieving the goals of business and achieving the goals of the people who that business affects. As we developed these questions and talked about it, we always came back to the Code of the West. So we have one slide today, it's already up. I sure hope everybody knows what the Code of the West is. I know I speak about it almost all the time because I think as a state, we are very lucky to have a state code that recommends an ethical path for both our citizens and, you know, as it was originally developed, our legislature, but I'll leave it to your opinion on how they're doing right now with that. So, but in any way, the Code of the West is a great way to remind people, business or otherwise, that come into my office. When I'm at my office, I have it on my wall to say, you know, this is how I believe we should act, and this is how I believe we should act toward one another, regardless of what side of the table I'm sitting on. The spirit of the Code of the West, I believe, mirrors most, if not all, of the general ethical standards and concepts that we see in those professional code of ethics in a very succinct, very Western, very Wyoming 10-step process. So without further ado, that's my intro, but I want to let our experts up here run the show. I'm going to start with we're going to just do a round robin, ask questions, and each will give their viewpoints. But the very first one is a very simple for each of you. What do ethics mean to you, and how do they affect your business? And I'll start with Mark from the far end.
What do ethics mean? Well, in Wyoming, especially in the ranching business, your reputation is priceless. And if you screw it up, word will get out about it on the other side and the other corner of the state before you get out of bed that morning. So that's the first thing you have to do, is protect your professional reputation. How do you do that? You deal fair, you deal straight, you deal square with people. You look back and see what your predecessors have done, and maybe hopefully see what your successors should do. Some of it's art, a lot of it's science, but how we handle that and manage that, our temperament, going into those discussions is critical. And so I like to be treated well, and I like to treat people well. And if not, then we try to find a solution, an agree to disagree standpoint. So to me, the ethics are important to protect your reputation, protect the industry, because like it or not, you represent whatever industry you're in. And sometimes what you say, or sometimes what you don't say, is what's held against you or held up for others to see. So that's kind of my baseline for whatever it's worth.
Good morning. I concur with everything that he said. I mean, your ethics is everything. I mean, that's how people see you and how you go about business, and it's going to follow you around forever, how you handle certain situations. So, and also you want to be able to handle it yourself and be able to sleep at night. So I want to make sure that you're always handling everything as ethically as possible, and you're making the best decisions for everyone involved in any scenario. And even companies, things that Jake talked about, they do have ethical codes, but I feel like the Code of the West, which most of us grew up with something, maybe we didn't know it was necessarily called the Code of the West, but it was ingrained in us. So you have your personal ethics. I feel like you need to make sure you follow that at all times, and keep it in mind that it's a small town, long roads here in Wyoming.
Well, thank you, and good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Before I directly answer the question, I want to make a couple points of, it's kind of interesting. I feel like I'm really at the intersection of a lot of different industries that I interact with on a daily basis, besides what you heard from our moderator on my background. So my wife and I ranch in Converse County as well. And actually, I just talked to my landman on Monday, who is helping me put together some stuff that's way out of his realm, but he's gracious enough to help me with some other things relative to land ownership, which is really kind of neat. We have production on our place, so as I mentioned, we're at the intersection of agriculture, energy, and then, as was mentioned, I get the opportunity to work with the university here in the Ranch Management Ag Leadership Program. So 40 years in business, in industry, coming and been back on the ranch here for a period of time. I also, at the university, we teach in the Ranch Management Ag Leadership Program next fall. For those of you that are students, we are rolling out a program on principle-based ethics. So you can go online as you're signing up for classes this fall. It's RMAL 4990. It hits at the heart of what we're talking about right here. And so I wanted to just offer that up. We also have another class called it's RMAL 4700. It is elements of leadership. And every one of you, if you sign up for that, every one of you as students should sign up for those classes, at least one or the other, whatever your schedule will allow. Every student, frankly, my belief is every student at the university should have leadership training. I didn't really start developing my leadership skills until I was well into my career, and boy, did I really miss out, because I didn't have the opportunity when I was here on campus to go through any level of leadership training, which includes ethics training, and I wished I would have, because it would have made a huge difference in my effectiveness as a young person in the workforce on how I might have treated and worked with other people. So that being said, I would encourage you to look at RMAL 4990 and RMAL 4700 next fall, and we'll expect to see your shiny faces in one of our classes. So, and I'm teaching 2 classes this spring on leadership. They are fantastic. We have some of our students sitting right out here at the table. Talk to them right here. Randall, raise your hand. Randall's my colleague in the Ranch Management Ag Leadership Program. He really gets a credit for putting the program together. I come in after the fact and have developed the leadership series, which includes ethics. So a big part of leadership, as you might guess, is all about ethical behavior. If you can't get that right, you're not going to be an effective leader. It's the bottom line. And frankly, you won't be effective as an individual either. Ironically, we all believe we're ethical. We all believe we act with ethics. And you know, it's interesting when you really study leadership and you think about that from that perspective. We judge ourselves based on our intentions, and we judge others based on what they do. It's almost like a double standard. So we give ourselves a little break sometimes if what we do isn't 100% consistent with what we believe. And you can probably think at times maybe when you have thought about that. So I love the quote by Alan Simpson, who said, integrity, it's about integrity. If you have integrity, nothing else matters. If you don't have integrity, nothing else matters. So it's all about integrity. So my, kind of perspective on that is integrity first, last, and always. And we'll talk more about that. I'll mention some other examples of where integrity comes into play as we get through some of the other questions.
Great, and thanks for your comments on that. And I'm going to mention one thing too. I am not from Wyoming originally. I grew up in the Midwest, but did attend 25 years ago the University of Wyoming and have been here since. The first day I walked into law school, I had just left working the Forest Service in Alaska. I didn't know what I was getting into, but the thing that stands out the most is former and the late Dean Jerry Parkinson looked at us and said, look at everybody in this room. And this is something the students should pay attention to. They're like, if you practice in Wyoming, you will see every one of the people in this room and every one of the people in this school in practice for the rest of your career. And the idea was integrity. We need to treat each other well in this school. We need to have integrity. And it's so important in the legal profession. It'll continue to be one of the sole tenets of your career. And that stuck with me forever. And I would like that to stick with students, because if you intend to have your business in Wyoming, that will absolutely be the case. I see at least 6 people in this room that I went to school with. And we all talk to each other all the time, but I think all these people have made that point. But I think it's especially critical to know that the ideas we are talking about started the day you walked into the University of Wyoming. So, we'll move on to some more questions. So in decision making, leaders can often operate in ethically gray areas. How do each of you personally navigate situations where maybe the law allows an action, but your professional ethics make you double think that or think twice? And let's start with Doug this time.
Yeah, a couple things. I think when you're in business and you're in a leadership, you're really finding a way to balance competing interests at times. And so you all know that there's, you have your own perspectives on things, others have their perspectives, and you got to find a way to meet in the middle. I think it's all about doing, and it's probably the essence of integrity again, it's about finding, it's doing what's right, not just what's legal. We all know, and as we mentioned earlier, the legal aspect is probably the low bar, and really finding that balance between those competing interests. So I'll just give you a couple examples in my own perspective that this has come into play. So a year ago, we also have hay farms at Torrington, and we had delivered some hay to a customer at Lusk, and it was decent hay. It might have been a little on the damp side, but it was still good, but it had a little bit of kind of moist odor about it. The customer received it and was really upset because they thought it was going to be moldy, and which we had already opened a bale on our own place and fed it, and it was not. It was really, really good hay, some of the better hay we'd put up, but it didn't really smell like it. And so, this customer was really, really upset about it. And so we just agreed to say, hey, we'll just come and get it. We'll just come and get the hay, and we'll replace it with another cutting of hay when we get it put up, which we did. So we covered the cost of the trucking to haul the hay back to our farm, and then to put up another batch of hay and deliver it to them. And we wouldn't have had to do that. We knew what the hay was. We had opened it up. I'm guessing they clearly, once they would have done the same thing, would have been satisfied and comfortable with it, but that wasn't the point. And so we went above and beyond to do that. Let me give you another example. So at Farm Credit Services America, we sell crop insurance. And the crop insurance deadline for sales is March 15th. The customer has to sign the crop insurance application by March 15th. And you know how things go. Life happens. Sometimes customers don't get into the office to sign their crop insurance application on time. And so we were faced with a situation one time that a crop insurance salesperson signed the application on behalf of the customer. Actually, the customer asked them to do that. And if you know, I mean, these are legal contracts that are between the customer and the crop insurance companies, and it's not appropriate. It's fraud. And so even though the customer gave us a consent to do it, it was not right. It wasn't the right thing to do. So we had a really hearty discussion around what the right course of action was. And we felt that there was only one course of action. First of all, because it was fraud, even though the customer authorized it verbally on the phone, we canceled the policy because we didn't feel if something happened that we could stand up in front of the appropriate parties and defend the fact that the customer had actually entered into that contract. And furthermore, we ended up, and this sounds kind of cold, but we terminated the employee because they crossed the line and did something that was not legal. And so you might say that's really a hard line to take, and it kind of is, but one of our core values in our company is integrity. And we acted on it. And it sent a really strong message to everybody in the company that this company stands for integrity. We'll do what we say we will do, and we're going to do things right. And, you know, it was unfortunate, but that's what happens when you live with integrity and you live with a code of ethics. So just a couple of examples I thought I'd share with you.
For me, on quite a few of the projects I've worked on, it seems like it goes back to common sense and what the situation is. And we know there's always several different scenarios on that, but you've got to look at what your landowner wants, what industry wants, what BLM wants, what the state wants, and trying to make everyone happy and still stay inside the lines of what's ethical. But it really, for me, just goes back to common sense. And then what is it going to be, not just tomorrow when we're going to construct this, what is going to be the impact 5 years, 10 years, 20 and 30 years down the road? So you have to look at everything holistically and see what impact that is going to have on your landowner, on your industry, and on, say, wildlife. And there's a lot of tools that we have, and thankfully we have really good relationships with these folks, and generally we can all come together and come up with a really good decision that does fall in the lines, being ethical, and we have integrity. And that's really what leads these decisions, or at least, I mean, for me, and I feel like the group that we work with. So mine's kind of short and sweet.
Great. Mark?
I'm going to frame this a little differently, and I want to do some background about our ranch. It's not my family's ranch. It's a place I ended up working on to get through high school and pay my way through college. Really smart individuals. And in fact, Mr. King was just smart off the charts. But we're surrounded, we're right down by the edge of Cheyenne, and I'm going to run off everything I can think of. We've got city landfill next to us. We have the city of Cheyenne's water treatment plant next to us. I can see the nuclear storage facility from F.E. Warren from my porch. I've got the North Range Business Park, which is Microsoft and Walmart's distribution center. Interstate 80 goes through the middle of us. We have a small oil field, mostly a stripper field on us. It's been there since 1948. We have a wind farm on our west end, and Union Pacific Railroad is on our south border. Since it wasn't originally my place, I was in a position to step back and watch to see how Mr. King and Mrs. King would deal with these things. And I heard a lot of complaining that they would open a discussion, they would do a project, and none of it turned out the way he wanted. But I don't remember him talking to them up front. In my particular case, I'm a real stickler for reclamation. And I don't care if it's a road disturbance, a pasture, if they're out there with the thumper trucks, or when they're not using thumper trucks anymore, but any kind of disturbance, I really like to see that done right. And so I'm usually right up front with whoever, whatever the company is. The first thing I ask about is reclamation. I want it back to original contours. I want the right kinds of grasses. I want things that are compatible. Who do I turn to? If it doesn't turn out the way I want, are you going to have somebody come back and spray it or retill it or whatever the management might require? So I tried to get that up front so that we're on the same page. Because if that's the case, then I think we're in a position where we're amiably looking at a good outcome. They don't want to hear from me again, and I don't want to hear from them again. We want to go on with our business, and life is good. So if you don't get that up front, that's what happened. Because in my opinion, when you have to finally pull out the lawyer card, and the last words to the entity that you're talking with is, well, we'll see about that, you know it's probably not going to be good. And it'll be a long, protracted battle. I've watched other ranchers do that, where they have actually thrown that out first, and the game is on, and it's not a good one. So I try to approach it from let's have the honest discussion up front and make the adjustments. To me, that was the ethical way, because they understand my expectations, and I also understand their expectations to do business, make profit, and move on, and be good neighbors.
Great. For our next question, when we've talked about it and you've heard it already in the first 45 minutes of the conference, we have a lot of competing interests in Wyoming. When you balance those in your businesses, what ethical framework or principles do you find guide your decisions?
We're going to start with rotating microphone on my end this time. I like to talk to folks in the industry. I like to find out what other ranchers have done. One thing that for me that is worked is to not sit at home and not put four walls around myself. I've got to go out and interact. In my case, it's been great with the trade associations, Wyoming stock growers, conservation districts, those kind of folks who interact on large scale projects. I see the same thing with agencies like Forest Service and BLM. See what they're doing. See what sideboards they've got that they've got to operate on. Sometimes what I think they should be able to do, they can't legally do. But sometimes if you get out ahead of them this and you work with them, you talk to their manager, you talk to their district rangers, you talk to whoever's in charge of their environmental controls. A lot of times they say, yeah, this is what we're supposed to do, but we think we could make this better, and I'll just make that part of our arrangement. I'll do some of it up front, and some of it will just work on a one-on-one basis with us. And I think that's really successful, where you have that discussion up front, and you say, I know what I need, what do you need, and how can we come to that in some sort of forum that's civil, that actually comes to resolution. Very seldom do I have a project, federal deal, state deal, a private entity, energy, whatever, where we don't come to some resolution and a good start before that project ever breaks ground. And by doing that, I get some of that in the contract legally. The rest of it, I go out and talk to the managers on the ground. Sometimes that's all it takes. The one-on-one, it's pretty tough to say something bad to somebody over the phone, but when you have that face-to-face discussion and look them in the eye, it's a little tougher to take that tone. So I try to get along with people. That's the first thing I'd like to say.
And again, agree with what he said. I mean, communication for us is key. Whenever you're dealing with different entities, it's getting right in front of them face to face and hearing what their experience had been with these past projects. Was there anything that did not work well for them and that they really care about? Like Mark said, he really cares about reclamation. that's really good things to know, because then that can help us kind of guide where you're not going to want to take something over a ridge where it's rocky, which I would never recommend that anyway, because your reclamation is never going to turn out great. But it's always good to know those things up front and having that planning piece and communication with each individual that you're going to be working with, and kind of gathering all the information and what makes sense for everybody, and where you can corridor and where you can keep your roads in the same place, lessen our impact. If we're all working together and have a good relationship, I think it's a win-win for everybody, as long as you're honest about the things that you truly value and what you want for the future of that project.
Yeah, I think this goes back to a little bit of what I said earlier, do what's right, not just what's legal. And I think we all know that if we have to resort to following the letter of the contract or the agreement between, say, your company and a producer or an agricultural producer, as an example, then we probably lost our way already, because that's really not the guiding force. And let me give you an example. So we have some newer production on our ranch up there, and we have a great relationship with the Landman. He normally, not always the case, but he's really good about letting us know what's going to happen, even in reclamation of restoring some lands. And that we have the same thing with pipeline and easements. And what I look for in those situations is those people that will at least take an interest going above and beyond what's required. And, let me give you an example. So a pipeline company that will come in and say, okay, they reseeded it, it's growing, it's going, and they come in and sprayed. And they'll come in and ask, so Doug, is it going okay? Is it getting established the way you want it to? And I said, well, it is, but there's a bunch of holes down the pipeline, as you know happens afterwards. And they create quite a problem for both the cows and especially for our horses as we're riding across the range trying to do our work. And I said, there's some places where the holes really need to be filled in. Oh, by all means, we'll get right on that. And they did. That's what I look for, is somebody that goes above and beyond to make sure that we have those competing interests dealt with. On the other hand, we have some old wells on our place that we have quite a time with the producer on. And they had a water spill that ran across some of our adjoining property, and it killed the grass. And we cannot get them to do anything, even pay attention or listen to us or return our calls. That's the difference in ethical behavior.
Well, this kind of flows right into our next question. Can you share an example of a time when taking the ethically right path came at a professional or political cost? And if so, what did that experience teach you about your leadership in your field?
I'll give you a couple examples that aren't related directly to oil and gas production that I think really. I think ethical behavior is something you live. You live your values every day. It's not just when you're at work and you're dealing with your company assets and dealing with producers. It's what do you do when you're out with your friends? How do you behave? And are you conducting yourself in a manner that would be respectful and that your company or your parents or whoever would be proud? Let me give you a couple examples. So in the business world, and this is one that I did, it's really not, I don't know if you call it an ethical dilemma, so to speak. So our team member, we had 1,500 employees in our company. I was the president and CEO for 13 years. And we had really had a challenging spring, and our team had really stepped up to everybody in the company had stepped up to do a yeoman's job, and we came through it in really good shape. I wanted to do something out of the ordinary for our employees. And not just, we had an incentive program that did some things. So I recommended to our executive team that we give every employee in the company a $250 gift card and a really nice note thanking everybody for their effort. And the frontline employee, the lowest paid would get the same as the senior team would get, $250, just as a token of our appreciation. Well, I didn't go to the board of directors. My board was really sensitive about compensation, and this is kind of a compensation issue, so to speak. I knew they would be, and I was pretty certain because of their sensitivity about that, they wouldn't have supported it. So I didn't go to the board of directors for that ask. I just did it because it was the right thing to do at the right time. And ironically, when our employees got the 250, they were elated because it was unexpected. It was acknowledgement that they didn't expect. And they actually called some of our board members and said, "Oh, thank you so much for this gift card. We just love it." And the board at the next meeting said, "Doug, what did you do?" And so I told them, I said, "Well, why didn't you ask us?" I said, "Because you wouldn't have approved it." And they said, "Oh, no, we would have." Well, yeah, at that point in time, when they saw what an overwhelming success it was, they would tell me they would have approved it. Well, ironically, they were so kind of hung up on this fact that I didn't ask them for their support, and I get that, but I knew how it would have turned out, that they dinged my incentive program that spring. Well, whatever. It was still the right thing to do, and that's the kind of thing. And so one other quick story. So I was with a couple really good friends on an elk hunting trip, and we hunted together every year. And we took a guy that was a friend of one of my really good friends, and long story short, we got him up there and he shot 3 elk. That's not a good thing. We're back in the wilderness, 2 miles off the trailhead, and he killed 3 elk. And so my buddy and I, who we both have really high standards, moral standards, we looked at each other and said, "Well, here's the dilemma. What do we do?" So we called a game warden on our good friend. And the game warden come up there, and he couldn't even get into the elk. It was a 2-mile ride to get back in there. But we told him what happened. We had one elk at camp, and we told him what happened. And he said, here's the game warden said, and he's a longtime game warden, and he said, "You know how rare what you're doing is?" And I said, "Really?" He said, "No, you know how rare this is? Most hunters would either leave them lay in the forest because of where they're at, and nobody would know the difference, or they would bring them in and stick them in the back of their pickup and cover them up with a tarp and run by the check station. But we turned our buddy in. And because we also knew that it had dire consequences for us. And you know what the game warden did? He gave our friend a $110 ticket for shooting too many elk, let him keep his elk, his firearms, his pickups, his horses, everything, and said, "Oh, by the way, if you had somebody else that tagged those 2 elk, would let you do it." We said, "No, we really don't have anybody else to tag those 2. We did, but we weren't going to ask somebody else to tag those elk." And so, by the way, he said, "I'll come back tomorrow if you'll take me." And I said, "Well, we'll just haul them out if you want to come back tomorrow." And they took him in and gave him to the food pantry type organization there in town. But it shows you when you do the right thing, oftentimes the consequences are not near as dire as you might expect. And I think that was the moral to that story.
It's actually funny. I do have one about hunting as well, but it was very similar to that. My brother-in-law, he went to go and shoot an elk, but it was a refugee, and so they had everyone with them. But when he took his shot, there was one right behind it, and so he dropped both of them. And they were like, "What do we do?" And the guy, thankfully, he was good-humored. He came over and he was like, "Oh, that's one of our best ones. You're gonna have to pay us like $100,000." And he was like, "No way, no way." And he goes, "I'm just joking. You're fine. We'll just go and donate it." But I mean, back to Doug's point, is I think everyone has this dilemma about being ethical, and if you raise any concerns about it, all of the backlash. But I think you also have to remember there's a lot of good things that do come of it, and I think it's positive things of your integrity and how you handle it, and people are very appreciative of how you handle those difficult situations. And it's actually refreshing. They're like, we do have a lot of really good people in this world that lead by integrity, and that they will say, "Hey, I messed up," because mistakes do happen. I mean, we all know that. That's how a lot of us learn, is through those different mistakes and things. But I think it shows the most by owning up to them and then seeing what happens. I mean, and as far as industry, I have, had some other things happen throughout my career that have come up with different companies or individuals that work for companies. It goes back to companies, they do have these ethical rules and morals that they expect their employees to follow, but you're always going to find individuals that maybe don't necessarily want to follow those same things. And I don't think you need to be afraid to stand up and say what they are doing is not necessarily ethical. And even though that might not mean consequences or anything for them at that moment, it still shows to everyone else your morals, your integrity, and that you are ethical on those things, and that you don't stand by and have somebody do that and think that that's okay, because it's not ethical. If they're, I don't even think sometimes there is a law that could protect them or a rule for those things. So, there's both sides of it. Sometimes it'll not quite turn out the way that you want, but I still think it's your integrity that is leading that.
It's tough to follow these two. They've pretty well got it nailed. But I'd like to put a couple of spin on a couple of things. First of all, I remember the first time I saw the Code of the West, I went, yeah, that's really cool, but I thought everybody already knew that. So I already had some of that ingrained in me. But it was nice to see it actually there in print, and that, it's been used and it's been documented, it's been referenced. That's great. Doug makes a great point about compensating and sometimes going around the board or the family members to do that for employees. They're tremendously grateful, and I think that's overlooked, especially in the farm and ranch deal. One of the things my predecessors did is they would have a big dinner sometimes at the end of the harvest or after shipping cattle. And we certainly would do something for an employee that was leaving or retiring. And now that I'm getting to be a little older, a little grayer, I'm starting to think that's not a bad thing, that I get a good send-off if and when that happens. What I would really like to do is address the ethics of the landmen. And I didn't know if we'd have a chance to circle back to it, but I really want to talk about this just briefly. I've noticed a trend through the years that some of the companies, and Kelly, this is not an affront to you, but a lot of the companies would send out really attractive land women to try to get me to sign a contract. And not to take anything away from that, but usually they were a little ill-informed or undereducated as to what the landowner may or may not want. I've watched that evolve, and many times the gals, now you're more informed and more sensitive and have a better handle on the situation than some of the guys do. This goes back to a pipeline that we had to actually, it created a dilemma for us. We knew that they were stating us a tremendously low ball figure for our easement. And I didn't actually decide this. It was Mrs. Ann King. And she was a real great stockman, but I didn't realize what a great negotiator she could be. She'd also been a teacher in a prior life, so she knew how to handle brats and reward the good kids all at the same time. She sat those landmen down and said, I don't know where she got the stats, but it was wherever she got them from, she whipped them out and put them on the table. She goes, you're offering us about 63 cents on the dollar of what I know you have allocated, so why don't you ante up and give us what we really need? And I went, wow, that's going to be fighting words. She got 97 cents of that dollar, and most of the folks along the rest of that line got in that 67-cent range. So her being upfront about that brought those guys to the table to do that. Now, I'm not sure how it works now. Most of us form landowner associations. We negotiate that. It's a different time. But I think the landman position has evolved, and in some ways has made it more amiable to landowners and operators on the land.
Thanks, Mark. I'm going to go back to you on this question and let you start. Have you ever disagreed with colleagues or other leaders that you've encountered about ethical implications of a project? And if so, how do you go about navigating those type of issues?
That happens once in a while, and it's really uncomfortable when it does. my biggest problem is, well, two industries. One, the oil and gas, and that's usually when a field will change hands with a different, a new owner, a new operator, and they're always trying to cheapen it down. I understand some business reasons. The fields are getting depleted. They're not running as hard or as well as they used to, and they're trying to figure out how to make it work. And they come up short on their follow-through, reclamation, access, maintenance of facilities. Have to hit them pretty direct with that, and sometimes threaten some retaliation. I don't know if retaliation is the right word. Maybe an adjustment. Access, times, crews, checking, that sort of thing. Usually calling right out on it happens. I've also had some crews that have been asked to do work and probably as subcontractors, and then they end up short skating the deal. They don't finish the work or don't do what was requested or didn't follow through, and they move on to the next job. And then it falls back to the operator, the producer that's running that entity. And I usually, if I have a good discussion with them, we can usually remedy that. But it's a real challenge, and it really leaves us holding a hot potato, and it's very uncomfortable. So once again, get those up front, get it in writing, and go talk to those people. One project, and I just thought of this while I'm sitting here talking. We had a project with a wind farm going in, and the company was doing their thing, and the power company was doing their thing, and they did not have a liaison on site to remedy any of the problems we had. A multi-million-dollar project, and they couldn't pay somebody $80,000 a year to oversee it. The resulting reclamation to remedy what it cost the company over $3 million. I thought that was a pretty poor investment. So if you're running a company, think about the backlash you might suffer if that was the case. So that's been the extent of mine. I haven't had to end up in court on any of that stuff, but that's my goal, is to not end up there.
I definitely agree. Nobody wants to end up in court on any of these situations. I mean, I've been fortunate. We've been able to work past any disagreements that there has been on any projects. And I go back to, again, it's just kind of common sense and sitting down and going through it. And they are uncomfortable conversations. It's not fun. Nobody enjoys them at all. But it's just kind of laying out the facts. And I mean, for industry, they have to make the project pencil. And it's then again weighing for the landowners, or again, the regulatory agencies, what they have going on in the area that we have to be aware of. And, you know, putting in, say, a pipeline and how that lessens the impact. Because if you can put in a pipeline, then you don't have trucks running up and down the road, which is creating additional dust, which is making it harder for our livestock to graze out there. So me coming from my ranching background, I like to try to have more pipelines and things, because the trucks, I know that wouldn't fly with my dad or for me, my husband, having all of those out there. So, I mean, it's really just trying to hit that compromise, or that you hope that you can, that everybody can come to reasonable terms on those and say, you know, I think I can live with that. I mean, I can't really on this, but on this part, I can. And you need to have that from both sides being able to work together on that. I mean, and that's typically been my experience. And to Mark's point, they're not comfortable conversations, but you need to have them.
I think the root of some of these issues gets in the place where we are looking, or we're positioning these issues as win-lose situations. And if you're looking at it from your perspective, either as a landman or a landowner, that you're going to come out a winner versus a loser, you probably already lost. Because that's not how business is conducted, and you all know that as far as landmen, and producers know that as well, is you have to find that middle ground where you can both agree that, okay, this is a reasonable deal. And if your organization is such that they're going to drive home the contractor or the the issue with respect to the, because they have leverage maybe, even though they may have leverage, it's never going to set good, and it's not going to put you in a long-term position to have a relationship that you're going to value or that's going to be valued, and it's going to have an impact on the image of you as an individual and that of your company. So I look for those opportunities and like to work with people that come to the table. If the almighty dollar is or your own personal incentive is what's going to drive your decision and your position, you're going to be in for a long haul. I can just tell you that, as opposed to set that aside to say, let's work out what's best for you and for us and find that ground where we can both come out winners. And, I can give you examples that we did that in business as well. There's many times when, I can remember specifically a time when we were rolling out a national program, and in doing so, we were going to step on a lot of toes. And we decided, and I was certainly in the position that we were not going to do that. We were either going to develop partnerships with those that we were going to be working with or against, if you will, or we were not going to do business in that particular territory. And we just walked away from the business unless we could reach that partnership.
Great, thanks. We've got about 5 minutes left and one more question that I'm going to give to our panelists, and then hopefully we'll have a few minutes to open the floor to a couple questions. But just kind of end up your thoughts today. What piece of ethical advice would you give to all of the students who will soon be graduating and starting their careers, regardless of what program they're in, too?
Well, I'll take a first stab at this. Ironically, I gave this advice in a commencement address I gave here at the university in December of 2018 for students, and that's live with integrity. Always. First, last, and always. Never compromise your own personal integrity. So even while I was CEO, I had an executive coach. Not that I was worried about drifting from my integrity, but to challenge me to be a better leader all the time. And one time he told me, he said, Doug, you have to be obsessed with the integrity of your word. I thought this guy had run off the rocker. And so as he went on to explain, he said, Doug, and this is both for students as well as landmen, do exactly what you tell somebody you're going to do. As simple as if you tell somebody you're going to meet them at 2 o'clock at the ranch, or if you're going to meet a friend at 2 o'clock at the ranch, you meet them at 2 o'clock or before. Not 2:15, not 2:30, not 3 o'clock. Because you all know what happens when you don't do what you say you will do. You chip away at that integrity that you would hope that you have. And if you do it more than once, not only do you violate your own integrity, but pretty soon you start impacting your the trust that you'll have and credibility. Integrity is the foundation of trust, and trust is the foundation of credibility. So whether you're a landman or a student trying to climb the ladder, those are really, really important perspectives. And I would just tell students one more thing is every day that you're on the job, you're interviewing for your next job. How you conduct yourself on a daily basis, whether that's before work starts at 7:45 or whether it's after hours, every day you're around your colleagues, you're interviewing here for your next job. Don't ever forget that.
I think it's doing the right thing is not always easy and living with integrity, but in this world, if you come into a situation where you just don't feel right about it, something just seems off, make sure that you slow down, ask questions, seek guidance from somebody else. If you're just not sure about it, there's nothing wrong with doing that and making sure that you're moving forward with integrity on that. And Doug's right. I mean, how you behave before you go to your job, while you're at your job, after hours, everybody's watching all the time. And you might not run into that person again for 20 years, but more than likely they're going to remember you. And so it is really important how you act at all times. I'll never forget, I had a landowner. She saw me like a ways off. I didn't even know she saw me, but I was picking up trash on her ranch. She remembered that. And she just adores me because I was picking up trash. I mean, just some of those small things that you do, it really impacts down the road. I mean, in years. And it's just, I'll say it again, Wyoming, it's just a small town with long roads.
These two make some great points, so I'll try not to go over the same ground again. But Doug made a great point about if it's about the money, it's you're probably already lost. And why I brought that pipeline story up, I have to let you know that when the company came back, their reclamation was flawless, best I've ever seen. So when they came back to do a second pipeline, we were instantly in with them. So there was a moment of compromise where we both gave a little, but we really both ended up with what we wanted, and that was great. As far as some of the we haven't gotten into the discussion about BLM and Forest Service. I think I just want to touch on that briefly. Sometimes those feel like they're really set in stone, but I find that going out and working with those district rangers, those supervisors, those managers, those range cons, talking about the problems or what you see as bring a solution to the table. Don't just demand stuff, but compromise by bringing a solution. I think if we try A, B, C, D, it's amazing how successful that reaction can be, and they look forward to working with you. That relationship is everything, and we do remember when somebody does a good job, and we remember when someone does a poor job. So.
Great. And I just to highlight one trend from that, and that is students, don't be afraid to discuss issues, questions about ethics with your peers, your coworkers. It's natural in business. I mean, we learn by being ingrained with our teams, and this is stuff most professionals are thinking about. So, there are really hard ethical issues. As an attorney, I face conflict of interest issues all the time, where two of my clients are suddenly battling. I don't like that. It doesn't help my business, but I am not going to represent either because I can't affect that interest. So, it's something we talk about every day. You should be comfortable talking about it and approaching your peers, your friends, your coworkers, and even your supervisors, because if they want to have a strong business and they want to have strong relationships with the folks they work with in Wyoming, it's something they absolutely should be thinking about from day one. I think but do we have any time for questions? We ran out of time thanks to our great panel, but thank you to Doug, Callie, and Mark. I think they will probably be around for a little bit, and I know we have a networking half hour now, so I think if there are questions, I know I would be happy to answer some too and just reach out. But again, thanks to all the students and the staff of both SCR and the College of Ag for, again, putting together a great event and giving us a little snow yesterday.